I was head of digital construction for the Ministry of Climate. I was at the Estonian government for 5+ years, which is a long time to be in government, in my view. I went there to be there like 2 or 3 years, but okay. But now I work for Future Insight, is a software development consulting company working on smart solutions for construction industry. And this is what I'm going to talk a little bit about in my presentation as well. And I'm also involved with Building Smart as a member of their board of directors, Building Smart International, EU BIM task group, and the CCI classification stuff also that we started at the ministry and a collaboration with a lot of other countries. And actually, I just came from the Building Smart summit in Marrakesh, which was slightly warmer temperature-wise, but I think human-wise, this room is just as warm, even a bit more cozy, to be honest. But yeah, interesting developments also happening at Building Smart. But the thing with the Building Smart Summit events is they're very technical, and it's a very technical crowd. And here I feel maybe a little bit more comfortable talking about, what is, how do we really implement the cool stuff and the technologies that are coming from standard bodies like Building Smart. So, but let's start with the challenges first and look at what is the problem we're solving. And taking a really long look, and it's nice to be in front of this big screen, which kind of is warm and you feel the heat. But the problem is climate change, and there's no denying it anymore. There used to be, people saying, well, it is, it isn't, but I think there's no denying. We all see the evidence. We see the fires, the floods, and there's going to be mass migration due to this climate change, probably very, very soon, which leads us to the problem of a housing crisis, which is an economic problem, which is a social problem. And the fact is we just can't build fast enough. We don't have enough houses for people. So this means construction industry is at one of the cores. Well, it's not a core of the problem, but it is one of the strong influencers who can change this for the better. And this slide or picture represents digitization, digital transformation. I mean, how do you put it into a picture? But, well, this is as good as any. But the idea is that we're also going through this digital change. And societies, the way people communicate, and the way companies operate. Olivier was just giving us really good examples of, the changing business models, how they're linking, how the lines between, what is a technology company and what is an industry company are getting blurred. And I really think every company in the future, if not now, then in the near future, will be a technology company. So how do you manage all of this? Especially from a construction point of view, how do we kind of help solve some of these challenges? We're not going to solve the climate crisis, to be honest. That is something much, much bigger. But we can start with solving, for example, the housing crisis, the construction efficiency problems, and it also starts with building permits. And why building permits? Building permitting is really one of the key processes. And we need building permits to make sure that we still have, safety, the buildings conform to legal requirements, and we're using resources efficiently. Safety is, of course, first, because if we leave it only up to the developers, then I think they will cut some corners. So even though the process itself is quite tedious, expensive, time-consuming, it is a needed process. And it is a key process in the building life cycle, even though people don't really maybe pay that much attention to it. And how to, solve the issues that building permits take a long time. It's maybe not the biggest problem in Estonia or even in Finland, but talking to a lot of governments around Europe, around the world, municipalities, companies are waiting for months and months to get any permits. And at the same time, the need and the requirement is getting stronger and stronger. And they really want to solve this problem. And so far it's been like, let's add more people to the problem, try to solve it, pay more, raise the prices, etc. But this is not really solving the core of the problem. But there is a better way, of course. And that's what brings me to the killer apps analogy that I want to make. How many of you know the term killer app? How many have heard it? Wow, I think this is the most knowledgeable crowd I've done this kind of presentation before, or asked this question. The most percentage of hands went up. So it's good. So I can go fast on this one. But I'm still going to explain the concept. So the killer app means that it's usually a software product or service that is so good, that is so valuable, that it actually drives the adoption of a whole platform or a hardware device or an ecosystem just because you want this one specific software feature. And VisiCalc was one of the first killer apps, and it was the killer app for the personal computer. Excel wasn't the first spreadsheet program, VisiCalc was. But every one of us uses Excel. I'm 100% sure of it. In every week, by the end of the day, it boils down that at one point or another, you use spreadsheets. It's just what business is. And this is what businesses realized already back in the late 70s, early 80s, that we really need personal computers because this is a game changer. Because we need to do spreadsheets. We need to Excel, which is weird. But yeah. The other killer app example is the killer app for the graphical user interface, with the mouse and the windows. This was also pioneered by Apple. But the killer app that drove this development was actually desktop publishing. So for the first time, newspapers and magazines could be published digitally or edited digitally. So you didn't need all these expensive, cumbersome equipment. So you can imagine, you've probably seen pictures or movies about, the old presses and how they used to work in newsrooms. And this was an incredible game changer for them. So that's why they said graphical user interface, the only way to work. And others also started seeing this. Wow, this is really cool. For the internet, it's a bit more vague. What was the killer app? If you ask ChatGPT, it will tell you it was either email, which is true, which we use also every day. It could be the HTML language that powers the internet. And maybe more of you know the iPhone, but what was the killer app for the iPhone? Teemu probably knows it. Do you know, Teemu, what was the killer app for the iPhone? I'm putting you on the spot here. You're an Apple user. Come on. You should know this. Actually, you shouldn't. Because Apple also didn't know it. They released the iPhone in 2007, and it took them a few years to understand that although it was the nice design, the user interface, the touch interface really nice, it wasn't none of those. It was the App Store. The App Store was the killer app for the iPhone, and that's what differentiated it. And when Apple realized that, they really put all their efforts to build the App Store and the ecosystem, and that's why the iPhone became, well, the most popular smartphone in the world. And I honestly believe BIM-based building permits, or automating building permitting with BIM, is a killer app for BIM itself. Because it brings the value of BIM to people who so far have been very far from getting any value out of BIM. They don't even know about this stuff. And what I'm talking about is the stakeholders who are involved with the building permit process, but they're not engineers, they're not architects, they're not designers, and they're not contractors. But there are a lot of other people who have to make decisions and choices. And usually, so far, they still do it based on drawings, just PDFs and descriptions, etc. So that is one of the reasons I think if we bring the power of all this cool technology to everybody and we make it accessible, then we are really talking about a game changer that could take BIM adoption to the next level. And this could be a driver for many countries. Here in Finland, of course, talking about BIM, it's like going back in time because you guys already are, and this is what I say also, most places I go, that they ask me, like, okay, where do you know where BIM is like really used? Of course, they say Finland, because in reality, I think this is the country that has implemented the most into actual processes. Some are talking more about it, some are, they have big mouths, but in reality, they don't do it like the Nordics. And you guys are reserved, so I know that. You don't want to talk too much about it, but don't worry, I talk for you. So I'm really, really keen on doing that, because I honestly believe that. So, and just to summarize again, or go over the points of why BIM-based permitting is really a killer app, is because it gives us speed. It gives us the ability to automate stuff, make things more efficient, cut the whole process in half, or in the future, we can more or less automate over 90% of it. I'm not saying 100, because there's always going to be a human element involved, but the technical checks can be done by machines. Transparency. If you automate stuff, it becomes more transparent, because you know what you're checking, how you're checking, why you're checking. And again, in Finland, this is not that big of an issue. But for example, we're talking also trying to start a project in Ukraine, where the government is really interested in especially this aspect. So maybe it's not the speed they're so much after, which is also nice. But for them, what is really the driver is having transparency, because that's a big problem in Ukraine and also in other countries. And then, of course, quality. Because having automated checks and having the applicants review them before having them, giving them the tools to make sure that it meets requirements and regulations, this will improve the quality of the designs. So, case example of Estonia. I'm going to go through this quickly, but in Estonia, we already have digital building permits, just like in Finland, from 2016. This is a digital building permit, a digital container with a digitally signed PDF, etc. But it's still PDF. And the process itself involves uploading, drawings, PDFs, DWG files, and it's kind of like digital paper. But what we realized when we were developing this building registry, it also contains a lot of information about the built environment. So on one hand, it's a process workflow system, but it's also a repository for built environment data. And when this system was launched and the process started moving, we realized that, the building registry was really at the center of communication. And it was not, as I mentioned before, not just the engineers, architects, and the municipalities, but it also involves, utility companies, notaries, fire safety, rescue board, land registry, statistics. And we started seeing the pattern that it is why it is a key process, because it involves all these different stakeholders. And as a government, and it's centralized in Estonia, it shows that the government is one key stakeholder involved in every project. So the information is flowing through the building registry and the government systems. And it's not just one way, but it's, in many cases, it's a two-way communication. And that got us mobilized to really think, okay, how can we take advantage of this? How can we turn it into something more? So if you're see the building registry, which was not designed as a platform, but it was at the center of all communication and data exchange, maybe we should turn it into a platform. And that's how the idea of the construction platform was born. And so the main goal of the platform is to enable the exchange of losses and standardized data. And just to explain it in a more graphical way, and I know my Estonian friends have already seen this slide several times, but it's still a good case example. And I like to show this outside of Estonia a lot, because it still baffles a lot of people how this can be done. But this is a classical setup of an information system, the database, the service layer, the user interface on top. And this is what the building registry kind of started with in 2016. Well, not all of it. And we started expanding then when we realized that it's a platform. It's not just for the building permit process, but we added a utility network database. We started doing BIM-based building permitting. We developed the digital twin, and Regina is now running the digital twin development, the national digital twin. So it's always ongoing. It's never going to be finished. You need to develop it. And this means we're connecting a lot more databases, and also adding services from other government agencies, not just the ministry, like also the transport authorities. And pink bars at the sides represent the opportunity for private sector services also to connect with the platform. So it wasn't just an idea to have government services, but we should open it up and be able to connect both private and public services. And the platform itself is formed by this service layer. And a platform as a concept is actually nothing more than a set of agreements between these services to have a common architecture, at least in the sense of exchanging APIs, as much as possible a common language, and also a common philosophy that we come out of our silos and we really start using others' data and connecting with other services. Now, what we developed in Estonia is very hard to copy. It's very hard to take to somewhere else, to another country, to another government or municipality or company, because this can be an approach for bigger companies as well. So that's why actually I shifted to Future Insight, because at Future Insight we have kind of the same concept with the Clearly Hub, but this is a product and a service which connects both data and services applications. So Hub takes care of governance, user management, it structures, organizes your data library, etc., and it gives you the APIs to connect with most everything. And there's also a billing system built in there. So that is something that companies and governments can now also look at. Okay, we've taken the Estonian kind of example, and we've also kind of expanded on it and built a solution on top of it, which is still in development, of course, but we see the need of such a solution everywhere. The problems are the same wherever we go. Then we have at the core of the solution at Future Insight, and also at the Estonian government level, and I think every government and public client should rely on open standards. Not open source, because open source has a world of issues you're going to get involved with. Sounds nice. And often what I hear from governments is, well, we need open source because we want to ensure vendor neutrality. Fine, I get that. That is a reasonable thing to want, but open source is not going to guarantee it. And open source is going to bring with it a lot of issues and problems keeping and maintaining and running the system. And I know from experience, and I know my colleagues in the ministry are still struggling with all this custom bespoke development. What you need for the interoperability and vendor neutrality is given by open standards. So if you rely and you build your processes on open standards, you're more or less safe. I have a nice video of the Estonian BIM-based permitting checks, but you can check it out online because I see I have 2 minutes and the video is 4 minutes. So I'm not going to play it. But you can go, there's a YouTube link and you can find it online everywhere. Just Google it. But I want to just go over the lessons learned a bit. And this is maybe more insightful for you than watching a video, which you can do by yourself. If you want to do building permitting with BIM, you have to really think about what checks you start with. So we have certain approaches also at a European level where they do a lot of complex, they think they can do all regulations at once. No, that's not going to happen. But pick the ones that add the most value and are easy to automate. BIM requirements for these checks, really important to keep simple, clear, and machine readable. That's why you have IDS standard. You need a multidisciplinary team to do these things. You need lawyers, you need BIM specialists, you need permitting specialists, and involve key stakeholders and do it in an agile manner. But the biggest challenge, of course, is the implementation part. technology is already there, but the implementation is getting to the top of the mountain. And we are kind of there, Estonia is maybe with Finland one of the front runners, but you don't need to invent the gear. The gear is there. You just need to pack it correctly, and you need to start your journey up the hill. But I think it is around Europe, I see the tide is changing a bit, and we are starting to see a tipping point where really more governments and municipalities are doing this, and they're starting their projects. So it's kind of like the rock has been there for like 10 years at the same place at the edge of the cliff. And now we're finally, we're at the point where we can kind of start things. And according to a recent study by PwC, they did for the European Commission, 57% of surveyed municipalities plan to implement BIM in their building permit system. 57%. Yeah, Building Smart has acknowledged this by giving awards. We have the EU Network for Digital Building Permits. There's a lot of Horizon projects involving so many different stakeholders, mostly academic, but more and more getting more practical. The EU BIM Task Group is a group on the European level working to also push this topic forward. These are examples from different countries. And in April, we had a specific conference dedicated for digital building permitting. This is going to come again in Vienna next year. But of course, you need collaboration between the private and the public sector to really make it happen. Very close collaboration. But with that, I want to end my presentation, and I have the key takeaways there on the slide. Technology is ready. Start simple. Implement today. Start implementing today. Use open standards and taking cues from the startup community. You have to be bold. You're going to fail at some point. But if you fail, and you are going to fail fast, learn from it, and go forward. Thank you.